Welcome back, everybody, to the Big Igloo Podcast. Smart theology, dumb dad jokes. There you go. Thank you, Travis. And you brought a couple last week, so nice job. And I think that has held us over, you know.
Yes.
And so we'll just get right back to the text, all right? And yeah, we're moving along. We are rescuing Ruth. How do you think we're doing so far, rescuing Ruth?
Oh my goodness! So for such a short book,
it's packed. Isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
it's crazy just how much. Yeah, you like spend some time on verses.
Yeah,
and not just blow through because I mean it's easy to read Ruth in kind of one sitting.
Yeah.
But yeah, really slowing it down.
Yeah,
and taking time to really meditate. It's been really good for me.
Oh, you just said a word, Travis. Meditate.
Oh,
the Bible is meditation literature. And I think that's probably one of the biggest frustrations that I have. And I've done it.
Sure.
You know, get a Bible in year reading plan and we check it off and all that. By the way, this is like the most old school thing about me, but I am more millennial when it comes to my scripture. I read scripture most often on digital devices.
Yeah.
That's the most millennial thing about me, but I actually have actual pages in front of me today. And I love marking it up, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I will find is I can fall into that trap too of like, oh, I've got a reading plan. I'm just going to read through it and stuff.
Right.
And really, the Bible shouldn't, I mean, it can be read that way, but it calls for meditation.
Sure. And
there's some of this. And look, you know, I don't read Hebrew. I don't read Greek. It's on my bucket list. It's something I want to
Sure.
at some point. Just to deepen. You don't have to, but it is interesting. I like to think of it this way. I like going on adventures, you know, go tour places. I love tour guides.
Oh yeah.
Whether that's on a mountain trail or whether that's I remember I went to Independence Hall in Philadelphia, you know, and there was a park guy that took us through and just told us some of the interesting details, things that aren't necessarily in the history books and stuff. But it's great when you go someplace and people point out things along the way. And that's kind of honestly, you know, that's my heart for this podcast is that we turn some stones here. We show you, hey, look at this. Look, you know, you might have read past this and stuff. But it's meditation literature because it calls us. The Bible will oftentimes, for every question it answers, it'll raise probably 5 more or 7, you know, if we want to be real spiritual. Right? But, you know, the thing is, it's like, we can't be afraid of that, you know? And so, yeah, as we're going through this book of Ruth and just seeing things that connect to other things. And one thing like Tim Mackey with the Bible Project, he talks about hyperlinks. He just talks about hyperlinks all throughout Scripture. And it's true. Like, if you know a hyperlink, when you click on something, it takes you to another web page or whatnot. Right. You know, it's true. I mean, there's just ways that the Hebrew authors they'll use a word and they want us to think this word has been used before.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's just a deep level of Bible study.
Sure.
And listen, if you're out there and you've never heard those kind of concept stuff, I don't want to overwhelm you. I don't want to, you know, tell you you're studying your Bible wrong. I just want you to know there are deeper ways,
right?
And it's a journey. Yeah. And have fun in the journey. And hopefully this podcast exposes you to some of those things. But don't think you're like missing it if you don't know some of the things that we might be discussing or knowing. I didn't know these things even just a few short years ago. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. And so this is just an invitation. But yeah, I agree. It's meditation literature. And so let's go ahead and pick up the story. We of course talked about this whole scene with the feet and all that kind of stuff last week. And again, if you don't know where you land on that, I don't know where I land on it either. And again, I just have to make sure that I'm not like being so offended by something that is not a part of my culture,
right.
You know, but also understanding that, hey, we see how it turns out. And, and feet could have just meant feet too. So but we'll get past that. So here we go. Chapter 4. I'll just read and if you have a thought, you can stop me, Travis. Right, all right.
Yeah.
But, it says, now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. Now this Redeemer is never named. It's really interesting.
Oh, that is.
You know, so important as names are in the Bible, he's not named.
Sure.
So maybe the author wants us to just clue in on because he's not going to fulfill this obligation.
Yeah. So just another Israelite man that's close to the family or related.
He's more directly related than Boaz, according to Boaz.
Naomi.
Yeah, to Naomi,
Yeah.
Or Naomi's husband. You know?
Oh, sure. Yep.
And so it says, and behold, the Redeemer, he came by. So Boaz said, turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took the men of the elders to the city and sit down. So they sat down. Now, as I understand it, men would go kind of like to the city gates. That's where business would happen. They would talk about things. Kind of like the old dudes down at the coffee shop or whatever. I don't know do you have like that in Gibbon? I know
No, not really.
Not really. I remember growing up, like it was our daylight donut store, which was called Kirk's Corner, and like like all the old guys would go down there and have their coffee and donuts or whatnot. So that was kind of the city elders.
Sure,
small town. And so anyway, so they would go and they would conduct business kind of at the city gates and all that, and they would discuss things, right? And he took 10 men of the elders to sit down here. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. Sorry, I skipped something.
You did.
If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Now, I want to pause here for a second, because as I understand this, again, he doesn't have an obligation here, because if Naomi dies, this land just automatically goes to him, because there's no one left in Naomi's line.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a way in which, but because Boaz is this respected man, I think there's a little bit of political pressure going on here.
Oh, okay.
Like, hey, either you step up and do this, or I will.
Oh man!
And everybody else around is like, well, Boaz is a good guy. Yeah, you should do this.
Sure. And I was gonna say, and he was closer, right, to Naomi.
The other guy is, yeah.
And so, it does kind of fall on him, right? I mean,
well,
or it should.
It doesn't have to.
Yeah.
He's playing that card.
But I mean, so going back to kind of what we talked about last week, a worthy man.
Yep.
Again, he might not be confined by the letter of the law here.
Yes.
But
here's the deal. He's a worthy man. He's advocating. He's advocating for justice. He's advocating for what's right.
Yeah.
He's saying this is not a good situation. So you going to be the redeemer or am I?
Yeah.
Because here's the deal. If Boaz steps up and actually does this, then, I mean, it's going to make Boaz look better in the society, because they're going to be like, wow, look at him. He's taking a risk.
Yep.
Because here's the thing. Both men have something to lose. Because if by them marrying Ruth, she becomes entitled legally to the property.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So Boaz in a way is kind of like being like, hey, I'm willing to tie my kingdom, my empire, my whatever to this.
Right.
So what about you?
Yeah.
So let's look at his answer.
Yeah.
He says, so I thought I'd tell you in the presence of those sitting here. So again, there's kind of this pressure. Hey, I've got all these dudes here, right? If you will not tell me, and then Boaz says, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance.
Oh, man.
Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. So this guy basically is thinking about his own,
the fact that, he says my inheritance.
Yeah.
It's like, forget the lady. Like,
yeah,
I'm protecting my 401k.
And I just had this thought come to me once again. If we know this story and we hear that language of inheritance, there's the spot where the one guy asked to follow Jesus, and he says, yeah, come follow me. And he's like, well, my father has died, and he says, let the dead bury the dead.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that phrase, let the dead bury the dead. It's not that the father probably had not passed away, but he probably was on his deathbed, and this guy was waiting for his inheritance.
Yeah.
And so basically it was like, well, Jesus, I'll come follow you, but I got these other matters to take care of. And Jesus is like, again, putting his finger on the guy's heart of like, so it's just interesting. Again, if you think of kind of these hyperlinks and stuff like that, here's a guy who's, I don't want to lose my inheritance to do the right thing.
Right. Oh man. Is, because Ruth is a Moabite and not an Israelite, does that, I mean, I think it conflicts with the culture of the day, right?
Oh, yeah.
To be marrying outside.
Absolutely.
But is there anything in Scripture that forbids that?
So that's a great question. As I understand it, that what's explicitly mentioned is Canaanite women, not to marry.
Yeah.
But God does talk about not marrying women, or, the Old Testament does talk about marrying other women because you may follow after other gods. Solomon comes along later, and that's what happens. And so, so we do see stories later, particularly connected to Moab.
Yeah.
And so I've read up on some of this, and some people say, well, it's not explicitly, but again, it's kind of going back to that, the heart of the letter versus the spirit of the law is, I would say it's definitely something that, if you were really, if they were following things, I think that's why if you look at this story, we could question whether any of this would have happened in the first place.
Right.
However, the redemptive part of this story is, in spite of people, God still has a plan.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I can say too, with Ruth being a small town in Bethlehem, word's gotten around that Ruth has been faithful to Naomi, and so it would be clear to everybody that no, Ruth is committed herself to Naomi, to her God, and so like she's not an idolater,
right?
I mean, at least as far as compared to the Canaanites and all that, and so
there's something about the word had spread and traveled and got back to Boaz, and so they are absolutely like, they'd have to be flabbergasted, because this is so countercultural. This is so counter the norm. Even in our day, something like this would be like, what? Like, why you show that much care? The kindness, the hesed. This is a picture of that hesed. Once again, hesed, if we look at all the times of, like, we think about God's everlasting love, Ruth should be someone who comes to mind, of someone who embodies this. Not perfectly. Of course, no person's ever perfect, but at least streams of it, right?
Yeah.
So, now this was a custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was a manner of attesting in Israel. Give me your shoe. All right. Let's make this deal. We don't shake hands. We exchange sandals. See? It's just culturally so different, right?
And it's cool that the author does, like, hey, just so you know, like he kind of clues us in a little bit of like, this was a practice.
But did you know, though, okay, I don't know if you remember this. Several years ago, there was a reporter. This was when George W. Bush was president.
Okay.
And the reporter took off his shoe and threw it at George W. Bush.
Like, ducks it.
And they talked about, in the Middle East, that is like a high offense.
Yeah.
To remove your shoe and throw it at somebody today.
Okay, you say that now. Yes, I do remember that.
So here we're actually, it's a custom that goes way back to the Middle East. So, you can use your shoe. If you throw it at someone, it's not a good thing. But hey, here, have my shoe.
Oh, thanks, man.
It's so funny. I just, give me your sandal. Anyway, so when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, and he drew off his sandal, then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Also Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife. Now, here's the first time that we see whose wife she was.
Yeah.
Mahlon, all right? Because we just know that the boy's married, but it didn't say who married who. So this is the first time that he's identified as her husband.
Dang.
I have bought to be my wife to perpetuate the name of the deal of his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers in the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. That's a blessing. That's a blessing. If you go to a Shabbat, may God make you my daughters just as Rachel and Leah. It's actually Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. It's a blessing.
Yeah.
It's a blessing. They're praying this blessing over, may the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house. So they're praying this over Ruth.
Yeah.
This is like, we as a community now are adopting her. This gets lost on us as Westerners, as individualists, as we're, go make your own way and all this. In more traditional societies, you are your community.
Yeah.
It's not what you make for yourself. No, it's the people you belong to. Yeah. This is huge. The fact that the men are standing up and proclaiming this, we don't understand the community significance, because in a traditional society, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
Such a big deal.
Oh, that's cool.
And it also points out too, kind of even the heart behind the law too, because you're living in a day where you you need people to defend you.
Sure.
You can't be out on your own. You are your community, and your community is looking out for you. And you may have to lay down your life for somebody who's trying to steal your grain, or who's trying to, you know what I mean? And so this idea that they recognize that Boaz is doing this righteous thing is it's only strengthening their community.
Yeah. And
that's something that gets lost on us.
Sure.
Because we pay so much attention to my rights and my,
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there are values in Western civil, individualism and stuff.
Sure.
There are things about God does honor us as individuals, but he also calls us to a group.
Man, how much would that change though in America if we were a society that wouldn't just be about, pulling in my white picket fence, going in the garage, closing the door behind me and going in the house.
Yep.
Yeah. That's...
Yeah, if we had more of a Boaz, I'm looking out for the betterment of everyone here.
Yeah, I mean,
everyone.
Community.
Like I am my community, and I think that can have its excesses and abuses as well.
Yep.
But so can individualism.
Yeah.
Like you said, we just shut our door, we watch Netflix, and we forget about our neighbor.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It says, then all the people, verse 12. And may your house be like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. It's interesting. And so it's interesting because this harkens back to Judah, and Tamar, right? And this is the lineage of, this is the lineage of David.
Yeah.
Right? And so the time in which this story is being told has to come after David, and we'll get to that here in a second, right? So this is not being written down.
Yeah.
Written down at the time these events happen.
Sure.
But this is most likely because of an oral society. These are stories that are being passed down orally, right? And stories they would have told and retold and retold.
And so it's cool that it's like, I think the author's kind of zooming out of here a little bit. Yeah. It's like, this story's going somewhere.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yeah, because all of a sudden as an Israelite, you'd be leaning in Judah. Well, the tribe of Judah, we know. And there's prophecies concerning the tribe of Judah, and Judah was, of the tribe split. This, because most likely this was probably written down at the time the kingdom is split, if not completely crushed.
Sure.
The time of exile or whatnot, most likely is when this was. And as far as I understand it, man, I have a long ways to go in textual criticism and understanding, just how the Bible was put together and all that. But as I understand it, a lot of these stories weren't written down until like the Babylonian exile and some of this stuff. So, perhaps someone like a Daniel, was compiling things like this, just something to think about.
Absolutely.
So here we go. Verse 13, we'll bring it home here. It says, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son.
Dang.
Man. Right away, right?
Yeah.
And of course, we know sons are at this day, it's a sign of prosperity. It's just that's the way it was in the society. Now get this. It says, then the woman said to Naomi, blessed be to the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer.
Yeah.
And may his name be renowned in Israel. Whose name? The Redeemer.
Yeah.
Right? Or the Son, right?
Yeah.
Right? So may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life, a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him.
Yeah.
Then Naomi took the child, laid him on her lap, and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. What do you notice there? Who's the son born to?
Naomi.
Yeah.
It says like it's carrying on Naomi's name.
Yeah. Yeah. Shouldn't it be Elimelech?
Oh, man.
I mean, first of all, the son is technically born to Ruth.
Yeah.
But in the Redeemer sense, they're attributing it to Naomi, and they're not mentioning Elimelech.
Sure.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
That the women would rise up and not give Elimelech this credit or whatever, even though he's technically the legal. They're saying, no. A son has been born to Naomi.
Yeah.
So both laws, the Levirate and the kinsman redeemer, would have been beneficial to the men, but technically neither apply to Naomi or Boaz legally. That's what I wrote in my Bible here, right? And we kind of talked about a little bit that last week. But it's incredible. And so they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now that's a big deal in Israel.
Yeah.
the best king that they ever had. And yeah, not perfect, but David is, it's the star of David, it's the city of David. It's, David is that's Israel, in a sense. And then in this line, it says, now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. But I want to just take just a couple seconds here, and as we just close this, all right? Because what I find incredible and compelling about this is most likely this is being written in the time where David has reigned. Yeah. Who knows where in his reign, but it's calling us back to the time of Judges. It's calling us back to a time before David. It's calling us back to some of these things. And if you think about this, if you're a writer in exile and you've heard all these stories and God has compelled you to write these things down because they're organizing their stories, at least as far as I can tell, in the Babylonian exile. That's kind of when our Old Testament is being put together. Yeah. And some people are like, well, didn't Moses write the Old Testament? Or not Old Testament, but the Torah and stuff. And it's like, well, yes, but again, a lot of these things have been passed down, and we can find scriptural evidence where there are editors that drop in and make little corrections, or I should say corrections, or they just kind of maybe add to the story a little bit. Sure. Again, just things that are passed down, provide a little context, because it's like even in the Torah, it records Moses' death. Right. Well, he didn't write that down. I'm going to die on Tuesday. That's not what he said. That didn't happen, right? So someone came in and edited it and stuff, and we can find evidence of this. But what's incredible, and we were talking just not too long ago about this, when it comes to whoever put these stories together, though, think about this. If you're a proud Israelite putting these stories together, you would tell romanticized versions, you tell all the heroic stuff, but we don't get that with the Old Testament. The Old Testament is brutally honest. Yeah. Brutally honest about what Israel does, what they've done to their own prophets, how they disobey God. It's incredibly vulnerable and telling.
Especially when you compare it to like Egyptians that are like the kings that write stuff down, like everything is
they always look good.
Yeah, right? And
they're gods.
And so they no blemish at all, like written down and so the fact that we see that should attest to the truthfulness.
It really should. It at least should raise some curiosity to go, it's one thing to just dismiss it. There's other people out there that'll just, they're all, the Bible. How can you believe it? How can you? Yeah. And it's like, but if you really take it and really study it and look at some of these things, it's like, man, the Bible is brutally honest about the human condition. And really about again, if you understand it, and people get hung up on the wrath of God and all this kind of stuff, and I've never really understood that. Yeah, because I'm like, no, look at what these people are doing. Right. Even like we've talked about in the time of Judges, this story emerging in the time of Judges is remarkable. Sure. And it is a counter narrative to maybe what the times were. Yeah.
But it's a small candle in a really dark room.
It is. And again, for a Jewish person to say, Yahweh's faithfulness, and we see this amazing justice, and this leads to David. Yeah. But I think we would be, we wouldn't be worth our salt here if we didn't point out that one greater than David came. Yeah. That this is in the house of bread where the bread of life would be born. Yeah. Ooh. Centuries later, the bread of life would be born. And let's read this. So with Jesus in mind, he is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Yeah. He is the ultimate Redeemer. And in the message that I preached, I talked about how there's the hidden Redeemer who is Ruth, because of her pledge to Naomi, her hesed, her kindness, she's kind of the hidden Redeemer behind the scenes stuff. And then you have Boaz, which is clearly the obvious Redeemer, right? But then you have the ultimate Redeemer. And here's what I want to say about this. Listen, now this is saying this to the son who's born to Ruth or Naomi. But think about this in light of Jesus. Let me just read this. It says, She bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has left you this day, not left you this day without a redeemer." Have we been left without a redeemer? No, we haven't, right? "And may his name be renowned in Israel." Well, one day I believe the name of Jesus will be renowned in Israel, right? But what I can say is the kingdoms of this world, Paul says that God has given him a name that's above every name.
Yeah.
And that at every knee will bow. So not just Israel, but to the world. But yes, he came to Israel first, right? "He shall be to you a restorer of life." What did Jesus say? "I've come that you might have life."
Yeah.
And have it abundantly. "And a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you is more to you than 7 sons is given birth to him." And what's interesting here is we see this elevation of women here.
Yeah.
Because she says Ruth is better than 7 sons. Sons, the sign of prosperity. 7 meaning completion.
Sure.
She's saying this one Moabite woman has been to you better than the perfect family. And what they don't even know, and what the writer probably doesn't even know at the time is, yes, David would come out of this, and that's what they see, but there's even greater prophetic fulfillment, the fact that Jesus would come out of this.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Oh, my goodness.
For all of us to celebrate. Yeah. For all of us to be redeemed. Mm-hmm. That's amazing to me.
For sure.
It's incredible.
Thinking back to the fact that it points like Naomi had this son, I think it jumps back to chapter 1, where it's the chapter 4 is unraveling everything that's happened in verse 1. And so Naomi,
wow,
this is, and I'm pulling some of this from the Bible Project. They've got a great 7-minute video on Ruth, but he talks about how tragedy in chapter 1 is followed by loyalty by Ruth. And then we see the loyalty of Boaz lead to the redeeming aspect. And basically, Naomi loses her heirs, her sons.
Yep.
And then chapter 4, we see the crazy thing is Naomi's God has cursed me.
Yeah.
God has completely abandoned me. I'm without hope.
Yep.
And the fact that it's God is, completely unraveling this whole story.
Yeah.
Is absolutely just beautiful to me.
It's amazing.
And the fact that it's and again, God is not mentioned, at least by the author, very rarely by the characters.
Yeah.
And it's God in the story of Ruth is weaving the story of God's purposes and human decision.
Yep.
And how he beautifully meshes all those things together. And it creates this form of, and it's that I totally is that's what Jesus did.
Yeah. It is, and once again, I think there's just so many takeaways. And by the way, if you've gone through this. I don't pretend that we've overturned every stone on this. Sure. The Bible is it's always revealing. There's always things coming out. But I do find it interesting that once again, and we kind of made a little bit of mention this last time that really we're seeing the potential of humanity.
Yeah.
Right. That even in spite of our bad choices.
Sure.
That through loyalty, not that we're earning something, but out of that hesed, living from this place of kindness,
right?
That we see the hesed between a man and a woman. We see this kindness between Boaz and Ruth, and how this opens the way not only for David but ultimately for Messiah to come. That how much more if we would just be people who live righteously or justly, if we would advocate for others, if we would step up, how much more could God use us?
Sure.
And we're going to have very real situations that make us feel abandoned, that make us feel like, God, are you even out there? Are you even listening? How could this happen? We're going to have those questions. I don't care how long you live, you will inevitably face challenges at some point in your life that make you question those things.
Yeah. But
your faith is being tested.
Yeah.
Right. And it's in the persevering, and it's in this that we don't always see it. And again, the crazy thing about it is they didn't even see it all.
Yeah.
But we get the vantage point of looking back.
Yeah.
Seeing how this all comes together. So anyway.
Highly practical, man. Yeah. Everyday life of we don't get to see, the crazy, Moses splitting the sea and all these crazy miracles. It's more, the ordinary. It's the faithful small things in our life. And I think that's what makes Ruth such a cool book of the Bible. Is it's more like our life.
Yeah.
And it's like God's working kind of behind the scenes. And man, I just thought of Tim Keller, who we've talked about before.
Yeah.
He one of his messages that I just absolutely love. He talks about how God teaches us through these hard times, and it's like you come to this place of you believe that God's completely abandoned you and there's no hope.
Yeah.
When you arrive at that place, do you see God was just those small things, that God was basically carrying you through these things. He was making you a better person.
Yeah.
He was redeeming you
through
this whole thing, this whole process, and using those bad things for good.
Yeah.
That's,
well said.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, hopefully we rescued Ruth. So we'll see who we rescue next time.
Right on.
Anyway, hey, thanks for tuning in. Once again, like, subscribe, share, all that. And we'll see you next time.